welcome back to our journey into the night. Tonight, we are leaving the noise of the modern world behind and traveling back in time to a quiet beach on the southern coast of Australia. Imagine you are standing on Somerton Beach, near the city of Adelaide. The date is December 1st, 1948. The air is warm and heavy, carrying the scent of salt from the southern Indian Ocean. The sun is set, leaving a soft purple glow on the horizon. Listen to the sound of the waves breaking gently against the sand. A steady, hypnotic rhythm that never stops. The water comes in and goes out, leaving soft white foam on the golden shore. On this quiet summer evening, a young couple was walking along the sea wall, enjoying the cool breeze. They noticed a man lying on the sand. His head was resting against the concrete wall. His legs were stretched out and crossed at the ankles. He looked like he was sleeping deeply, enjoying the sound of the ocean. The couple did not see his face clearly, but they noticed he was wearing a full suit, which was strange for the beach in such hot weather. The man raised his right arm slowly, and then let it drop again, as if he was trying to smoke a cigarette but failed. They thought he was just resting, so they left him alone and continued walking, while the waves continued to sing their quiet song. The next morning, around 6:30, with the first light of dawn, the same man was seen again by someone riding a horse on the beach. The rider looked at the sea wall and was surprised to see the man still in the exact same position. He had not moved an inch all night. The rider approached him and touched him. He was cold. There were no signs of violence, no blood. He looked completely peaceful, as if he had decided to sleep forever while looking at the vast ocean. The police arrived and took the man to the hospital, and then to the morgue. And here, the true mystery began. A mystery that has never been solved. Let us look at him now, quietly, as the doctors examined him in that cold, silent room. He was a man around 40 or 45 years old. He was in excellent physical condition. About 180 centimeters tall, with broad shoulders and prominent muscles, especially in his legs, as if he were a runner or a ballet dancer. His hands were very soft, showing no signs of hard labor. His hair was brown, turning slightly gray at the sides. But the most strange thing was his clothing. Let us examine it, piece by piece, very slowly. He was wearing a crisp white shirt, a tie with red and blue colors, brown trousers, a brown knitted pullover, and over all this, he wore a fashionable double-breasted coat of American tailoring. The clothes were of high quality, clean and pressed. But when the police checked the clothes for a brand name or tailor's label, they found something very odd. Every single label, every tag, every name that could tell you where the clothes were made, had been carefully cut away with sharp scissors. Even his underwear had no label. It was as if this man wanted to erase any trace of his past, or where he came from. The police searched his pockets looking for a wallet or an ID card, but his pockets were almost empty. Let us take out what was inside, slowly, and place it on the cold metal table. They found an unused train ticket from Adelaide to Henley Beach. They found a used bus ticket, proving he took the bus that stopped near where he was found. They found a small metal comb of an American type, half a packet of juicy fruit gum, and a packet of Army Club cigarettes containing another, more expensive brand called Kensitas inside. And a box of matches that was quarter empty. That is all. No wallet. No money. No identity card. No keys. Nothing at all to link him to any person or any place in the world. He was just an elegant ghost who appeared on the beach and died in silence. Weeks passed and the police were baffled. His picture was published in papers all over the world. His fingerprints were sent to the UK and the USA, but no one recognized him. It seemed this man did not exist before he appeared on that sand. In January of the next year, a small breakthrough happened. A brown suitcase was found in the cloakroom of the Adelaide railway station. It had been deposited there on November 30th, the day before the body was found. The police were sure it belonged to the mystery man. Let us open this suitcase together, slowly, and look at the contents. It contained extra clothes, pajamas, a toothbrush, and shaving cream. But once again, all the labels had been cut off from the clothes. But there were other strange items. They found a spool of orange thread, of a type not sold in Australia, which matched the thread used to repair a small hole in the dead man's pocket. This confirmed the suitcase was his. They found very sharp scissors and a stenciling brush. A thing was the lack of extra socks, and the lack of any personal letters. The contents were precise and clean, but totally silent. Just like the owner, offering no answers, only more questions. Let us go back to the body. Months later, a pathologist discovered a tiny detail everyone had missed. Inside the waistband of the man's trousers, there was a tiny secret pocket sewn very carefully into the lining. It was impossible to see with the naked eye. Inside the secret pocket, they found a tiny scrap of paper rolled up tightly. When they unfolded it, they saw it was torn from a book, and it had only 2 words printed on it, Tamam should. These words are Old Persian, and they mean it is ended or it is finished. This phrase is usually found on the very last page of a famous book of poetry called the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. The police searched every library for a copy of this book with a torn last page. After a long search, a man came forward. He said he found a strange book tossed into the back seat of his car, which was parked near Somerton Beach on the night the man died. When they checked the book, the last page was indeed torn out, and the scrap of paper found in the man's pocket matched the tear perfectly. It was his book. On the back cover of this book, they found faint markings written in pencil. 5 lines of capital letters that looked like a secret code. The letters were WRGOABABD on the first line, and then MLIAOI, and so on. Experts from the Navy and intelligence tried to break this code. They thought it might be a spy message, especially since this was the start of the Cold War. But all attempts failed. The letters remained silent, keeping their secret forever. There was also a phone number written on the book, belonging to a young nurse living very close to the beach. When the police showed her the plaster bust of the dead man, she looked terrified, as if she knew him. But she denied knowing him completely. She admitted she had owned a copy of the Rubaiyat, but she gave it to an army lieutenant named Boxall during the war. The police thought they had found the man. But Lieutenant Boxall was found alive, and he still had his book with the last page intact. So, the case went back to zero. Who was this elegant man? Why was he on the beach? Was he a spy? Was he a lover? Was he poisoned by something undetectable, as doctors suspected? Or did he simply drift into eternal sleep while watching the ocean? What does the code mean? The Somerton man was buried in a cemetery in Adelaide. His gravestone reads, "Here lies the unknown man found at Somerton Beach." For years, his grave has remained silent, visited only by those who wonder about his strange story. We leave the warm sands of Australia behind now, and travel across the world to the cold, misty mountains of Norway. Imagine you are walking through the Estland Valley, near the city of Bergen. It is known as the Valley of Ice. The date is November 29th, 1970. The air is freezing, filled with the scent of wet pine needles and damp earth. A gray fog hangs low over the rocky slopes. It is a quiet Sunday afternoon. A father and his 2 young daughters are hiking up the steep trail. The only sound is the crunch of their boots on the frozen ground and the distant wind howling through the trees. They leave the main path and climb over some rocks, looking for a place to rest. But what they find hidden among the stones stops them in their tracks. Lying there, partially burned and hidden between heavy boulders, is the body of a woman. She is lying on her back. Her hands are clenched. Around her, the items are arranged in a strange, ritualistic way. There are bottles of water, a rubber boot, and burned paper. The father turns his children away and hurries back down the mountain to call the police. And thus begins the mystery of the Istil woman. Let us look at the scene through the eyes of the investigators who climbed that cold mountain. The woman was around 30 or 40 years old. Her hair was dark and pulled back. She was elegant, even in death. But just like the man on Somerton Beach, everything about her was designed to hide who she was. All the labels on her clothes had been cut off. Not just cut, but removed with surgical precision. Her distinctive clothes, her blue scarf, her expensive boots, everything was stripped of its identity. Near her body, they found a bottle of liqueur, 2 plastic water bottles, and a silver spoon with the monogram scratched off. Why would someone scratch the initials off a spoon? It was as if she was trying to erase herself from history. Days later, the police found 2 suitcases in the luggage storage at the Bergen train station. They were linked to the woman. When they opened them, the mystery deepened. Inside, they found wigs. Several wigs of different colors and styles. They found non-prescription glasses, used only to change her appearance. They found cosmetics, German money, Norwegian money, and British money. But just like the clothes on her body, every single item in the suitcases had been scrubbed clean of labels. The name of the pharmacy on the lotion bottle was peeled off. The brand on the cone was scratched out. She had gone to extreme lengths to ensure that no one could trace where she bought these things. She was a woman of many faces, but no name. However, the police found one small mistake. A shopping bag from a shoe store in the city of Stavanger. This led them to a shopkeeper who remembered her. He said she was elegant, spoke broken English, and smelled of garlic. Using this clue, they tracked her movements across Norway. She had stayed in many hotels, always using different names. Fenella Lork, Claudia Tielt, Genevieve Lancier. She had 8 different identities, all false. She always requested a room with a balcony. She was always nervous. She was seen moving furniture in her rooms, perhaps barricading the door. Who was she hiding from? Was she a spy during the Cold War? Was she running from a crime syndicate? Or was she running from herself? In her suitcase, they found a black notebook. Inside, there were rows of numbers and letters. It looked like a code. When the police cracked it, they realized it was not a spy code, but a travel log. Dates, locations, train times. It was a record of a restless journey, moving from city to city, never staying in one place for long. Always watching over her shoulder. The autopsy revealed something even more tragic. She had ingested over 50 sleeping pills. But she also had signs of carbon monoxide poisoning from the fire. Did she light the fire herself to stay warm and fall asleep forever? Or was she silenced by someone else who met her in that lonely valley? The official verdict was suicide, but the details never added up. Why burn your own face? Why hide in the rocks? She was buried in a grave in Bergen. No family came. No friends attended. She was buried in a zinc coffin so that she would not decompose, just in case her family ever came looking for her. But 50 years later, she is still waiting. Just like the Somerton man, she took her secrets to the grave. From the misty forests of Norway, we now embark on our and longest journey tonight, traveling deep into the heart of Russia, to the northern Ural Mountains. The date is January 27th, 1959. The landscape here is vast, white, and silent. Imagine a world made entirely of snow and ice, where the only sound is the whistling of the wind across the frozen peaks. A group of 9 experienced hikers, led by Igor Dyatlov, set out on a skiing expedition. They were young, strong, and happy. Their goal was to reach Mount Otorten, a name that in the local Mansi language means "don't go there." But they were not afraid. They moved rhythmically across the white wilderness. Listen to the sound of their wooden skis gliding over the fresh snow. Swish, swish, swish. The sound is repetitive and calming. For days, they trekked through the deep powder. They laughed, they took photographs, they wrote in their diaries. They wrote about the beauty of the mountains, the cold air, and the warmth of their friendship. On the afternoon of February 1st, the weather began to turn. A snowstorm was approaching. The wind picked up, blowing snow into their faces, blurring the line between the earth and the sky. They realized they had gone off course slightly and were now on the slope of a mountain called Koletsyakal, or the Dead Mountain. Instead of going down to the forest where there was shelter from the wind, Dyatlov made a decision. They would set up camp right there, on the exposed slope of the mountain. Perhaps he wanted to practice camping on an incline. Imagine them in the fading light of the afternoon, digging a pit in the snow to level the ground. They pitched their large canvas tent. They laid out their sleeping bags. They took off their wet boots and heavy jackets. They were settling in for the night. Inside the tent, it was cozy. They huddled together for warmth. They cut up pieces of salo, a salty cured meat, and prepared crumbs for breakfast. They drank hot cocoa. One of them wrote a satirical newspaper for the group. They were relaxed. They were safe. Outside, the temperature dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius. The wind howled against the canvas walls of the tent, but inside, they were protected. But then, something happened. Something unknown. Something silent. In the middle of the night, while they were likely sleeping or preparing to sleep, chaos struck. But it was a strange kind of chaos. There was no avalanche. There was no attack by wild animals. Yet, for some reason, the hikers decided they had to leave the tent immediately. They did not unzip the door. Instead, someone took a knife and slashed the side of the tent from the inside. They cut the canvas open to create an escape route. And then, they walked out. They walked out into the freezing darkness, into the blizzard, without their shoes. Some were wearing only socks. Some had a single boot. Some were barefoot in the snow. Why would experienced hikers leave their warm clothes and boots behind in such deadly cold? They did not run. The footprints found later showed that they walked. They walked calmly, side by side, down the slope towards the tree line, about 1.5 kilometers away. They walked away from their only shelter, into the arms of the frozen night. What were they walking towards? Or what were they walking away from? The footprints disappear after a few hundred meters, covered by the drifting snow. Weeks later, when the search party arrived, the scene was frozen in time. The tent was half buried in snow, but the items inside were untouched. Their boots were lined up. Their money and IDs were still there. The unfinished cocoa was still in the flask. It was a ghost camp. The silence on the mountain was absolute. The wind had erased the answers. They found the hikers down by the tree line. 2 of them were found under a large cedar tree, next to the remains of a small fire. They had tried to keep warm. They had broken branches from the tree, climbing up to 5 meters high to get dry wood. The others were found scattered in the snow, as if they were trying to crawl back to the tent. They had fought the cold until the very end. The investigation was closed quickly. The official conclusion was mysterious and poetic. It stated that the hikers died because of an unknown compelling force. A force that nature threw at them, which they could not overcome. Was it a sudden change in pressure? Was it a terrifying sound caused by the wind known as infrasound that causes panic? Was it a military test? Or was it simply the mountain claiming them? There are no witnesses. Only the mountain knows what happened that night. Koletsyakhl stands there today, just as silent and white as it was in 1959. The snow covers everything. It hides the tracks. It muffles the sounds. The mystery remains perfectly preserved in the ice. We leave the frozen silence of the Ural Mountains behind us now, and travel west, across the continent, to the wild and stormy coast of Scotland. Imagine a group of small, rocky islands rising out of the dark Atlantic Ocean, completely isolated from the rest of the world. These are the Flannan Isles. The date is December 26th, 1900. It is Boxing Day. The sea is rough, churning with gray waves that crash against the black cliffs. A relief ship called the Hesperus is approaching the largest island, Eilean Moor. On board is Joseph Moore, a relief keeper coming to take his turn at the lighthouse. As the ship gets closer, the captain notices something unsettling. Usually, a flag would be flying to welcome them. Usually, the keepers would be standing on the landing jetty to catch the ropes. But today, the island is completely silent. No flag. No people. Just the sound of the wind whistling around the tall white tower. The captain blows the ship's whistle. A loud, shrill blast that echoes off the rocks. Honk. But there is no answer. Only the cry of the seagulls circling overhead. He fires a distress flare into the gray sky. It burns bright red and fades away. Still, no movement. The lighthouse stands there like a stone tomb. Joseph Moore lowers a small boat and rows to the shore. The waves are dangerous, slippery, and cold. He jumps onto the wet rocks and begins the long, steep climb up the 160 steps cut into the cliff. Listen to the sound of his heavy boots on the stone. Step. After step. After step. The wind pulls at his coat, trying to push him back, but he keeps climbing towards the silent tower. He reaches the top and walks to the heavy entrance door. It is closed, but unlocked. He opens it and steps inside. The roar of the ocean is suddenly muffled. Inside, it is cool and quiet. The only sound is the slow, rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick. Tock. Tick. Tock. It is the heartbeat of the lighthouse, still beating while the men are gone. Moore calls out their names. James, Thomas, Donald. His voice echoes up the spiral staircase, but no one replies. He walks into the kitchen, the main living area. What he finds there is a scene frozen in time. The fire in the grate has burned down to cold ash. It has not been lit for days. But the table is set for dinner. There are plates of meat, pickles, and potatoes. A chair is overturned on the floor, as if someone jumped up in a sudden hurry. He checks the bedrooms. The beds are empty, but unmade, as if the men had just risen from them. He climbs up to the lantern room at the very top. The giant glass lens is polished and clean. The oil lamps are trimmed and full of fuel. Everything is ready to be lit. The routine was followed perfectly until the very last moment. Moore checks the equipment locker downstairs. This gives the first real clue. At a lighthouse, keepers wear heavy oilskin coats to protect themselves from the storms. There should be 3 coats hanging on the hooks. But there is only one. 2 coats are missing. This means 2 men went out into the storm dressed for the weather, but one man, Donald MacArthur, left without his coat. Why would an experienced keeper run out into a winter Atlantic storm in just his indoor clothes? Moore sits down at the desk and opens the logbook. The diary of the lighthouse. The entries are strange. They describe a massive storm that lasted for days. The entry for December 12th says, gale north by northwest. Sea lashed to fury. Never seen such a storm. It notes that James Duckett, the lead keeper, was very quiet. And strangest of all, it notes that Donald MacArthur, a tough old sailor, was crying. Why would a storm make a seasoned sailor cry? The final entry is dated December 15th. It is short and simple. It says, storm ended, sea calm. God is over all. And after that, nothing. The slate for the next day was blank. The mystery is that people on the nearby Lewis Island reported that the weather on those days was actually calm. There was no massive storm recorded in the area. Was the storm only in their minds? Or was it a localized phenomenon that swallowed the island whole? A search of the island revealed damage at the west landing. Iron railings were bent like wire. A massive stone weighing a ton had been moved. It seems a giant rogue wave, higher than the cliffs, might have swept over the island. Did the men rush out to secure the gear? Did one fall in, and the others die trying to save him? We will never know. The bodies were never found. The Atlantic Ocean keeps its secrets deep in the dark water. The lighthouse was automated years later. Now, no one lives there. The rooms are empty. The dust settles on the table where the meal was left. But the light still turns, night after night, sweeping its beam across the empty waves. A silent guardian for no one. We leave the rocky cliffs of Scotland behind us now and drift further out into the vast, endless blue of the Atlantic Ocean. Imagine you are floating on the water, far away from any land. The year is 1872. It is a calm afternoon in December. The sun is shining through a thin layer of clouds, casting a silver light on the gentle waves. A British ship called the Dei Grazia is sailing slowly towards Gibraltar. The captain, David Morehouse, is standing on the deck, scanning the horizon with his telescope. In the distance, he spots a small dark speck. As they get closer, he realizes it is another ship. A brigantine. It is sailing erratically, yawing slightly to the left and right, as if the person at the wheel has fallen asleep. The sails are in poor condition. Some are torn and flapping loosely in the wind. Snap. 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 The rigging is tangled. Captain Morehouse recognizes the ship. It is the Mary Celeste. He knows her captain, Benjamin Briggs, a man of great experience and discipline. He knows that Briggs is sailing with his wife, Sarah, and their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. Something is wrong. The deck looks completely empty. Morehouse signals the ship, but there is no answer. He shouts across the water, but only the wind replies. He sends a small boarding party to investigate. The sailors row their small boat across the quiet water. The ocean is silent. The only sound is the water lapping against the wooden hull of the drifting ship. They climb up the side and step onto the deck. It is a ghost ship. The wheel is spinning loose, unsecured. The compass is broken and lying on the deck. But there are no signs of a struggle. No violence. No damage from a storm. It is as if the people simply evaporated into the salt air. The sailors walk slowly towards the cabin, afraid of what they might find. They descend the wooden stairs into the living quarters. What they find inside is baffling in its peacefulness. The windows are boarded up, keeping the rooms dim and cool. In the captain's cabin, life seems to have been interrupted in the middle of a heartbeat. A rosewood melodeon, a small musical instrument, rests silently in the corner. Books are neatly arranged on the shelf. On the floor, the toys of the little girl, Sophia, are scattered, as if she had just been playing with them a moment ago. On the table, there are plates set for a meal. Some accounts say there was unfinished breakfast, cups of tea that were cold but not spilled. In the sewing area, a small vial of machine oil stands upright on a table. This is the most important detail. It means the ship had not been rocked by a violent storm. If there had been a storm, the oil would have fallen over. The sea was calm when they left. So why did they leave? The sailors checked the cargo hold. It is packed full of barrels of industrial alcohol. 1,700 barrels. The cargo is intact. The food stores are full. There is enough food and water for 6 months. The ship is seaworthy. It has no leaks. It is a perfectly safe, floating home. Yet, the single lifeboat is missing. The rope that tied it to the ship is trailing in the water, frayed and broken. Did the captain panic? Did he think the cargo of alcohol was about to explode? Did they get into the small lifeboat to wait safely behind the ship, only to have the rope snap? Imagine them in the tiny boat, watching their large, safe ship sail away from them, pushed by the wind, leaving them alone in the vast ocean. The 10 souls of the Mary Celeste were never seen again. No bodies were ever found. The ship was sailed to Gibraltar by the crew of the Dei Grazia, but the mystery followed it forever. Sailors called it cursed. But tonight, we do not see a curse. We see a ship that refused to sink. A ship that continued its journey, peaceful and alone, guided by the wind and the stars. Imagine the Mary Celeste now, drifting in your mind. The sails are white against the blue sky. The wood creaks gently. Creak. Creak. The water splashes softly against the bow. It is a rocking motion. Back and forth. Back and forth. Just like a cradle. We leave the drifting ghost ship in the Atlantic now, and we travel north, far north, past the circle of the world, into the kingdom of eternal ice. Imagine the Arctic in the year 1845. It is a world of blinding white purity, where the sea is not water, but solid stone. The air is so cold it freezes your breath instantly. The silence is so deep you can hear your own heart beating. Into this frozen world sailed 2 magnificent ships from England, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror. They were the pride of the Victorian Navy. Massive, heavy vessels, reinforced with iron to smash through the ice. They were not just ships, they were floating palaces of technology. They had steam engines, hot water systems to warm the cabins, libraries with thousands of books, and even a player piano. They carried 129 men, led by the experienced Sir John Franklin. They were looking for the Northwest Passage, a map through the ice. Imagine them sailing away from the green coast of England, cheering and waving. They sailed into the white mist of the north and simply vanished. For nearly 170 years, no one knew exactly what happened. The world waited, but the ships never returned. Let us drift back to their first winter. The ships pushed deep into the Victoria Strait. The ice began to form around them. Not suddenly, but slowly. A thin layer at first, then thicker and thicker. Listen to the sound of the ice. Crack. Growing. A deep, heavy sound of the ocean freezing. The ice gripped the hulls of the ships. It did not crush them, but it held them tight. The ships stopped moving. The engines stopped turning. They became islands of wood and iron, locked in the center of a white desert. The winter in the Arctic is long. The sun sets in November and does not rise again until February. Imagine the darkness. Total night for months. The only light comes from the stars and the shimmering green curtains of the aurora borealis dancing silently in the sky. Inside the ships, it was warm. The men lived a routine. They cleaned the decks. They read books by candlelight. They put on plays and concerts to keep their spirits up. Outside, the wind howled at -50 degrees. Inside, the clock ticked. Tick. Tock. Tick. Tock. Waiting for the summer. Summer came, but the ice did not melt. The ships did not move. Another winter came. And another. The ships were now tombs. The steam engines went cold. The silence of the Arctic began to seep into the wood. The men waited. They watched the horizon, day after day, for a crack in the ice. But the white horizon never changed. It is the ultimate test of patience. To sit. To wait. To listen to the wind. Eventually, they made the desperate decision to leave. They abandoned the luxury of their ships. They packed heavy sledges with supplies. Strangely, they packed heavy items like silverware, curtain rods, and books, things they didn't need, perhaps because they couldn't bear to leave civilization behind. They began to walk south, walking across the frozen ocean, dragging their heavy loads through the snow. One by one, they faded into the white mist. The snow covered their tracks. The wind erased their voices. But the ships remained. For over a century, the Inuit people told stories of ghost ships that appeared and disappeared in the ice. And finally, in our modern time, cameras went down into the freezing dark water and found them. The Erebus and the Terror, sitting upright on the ocean floor, perfectly preserved by the cold. The images are hauntingly peaceful. The glass in the windows is still intact. The captain's desk is still organized. Plates are still stacked on the shelves. It looks as if the crew just stepped out for a moment and will return any second. The cold water has frozen time itself. There is no decay here. Only stillness. The ships are sleeping at the bottom of the world, wrapped in the eternal silence of the Arctic. We leave the tragic silence of the Arctic behind us now, and travel to the very bottom of the world, to the continent of Antarctica. It is the year 1914. While the world is at war, a man named Ernest Shackleton sets out on the ultimate adventure aboard a ship perfectly named the Endurance. Imagine a wooden ship, built of thick Norwegian pine and oak, sailing into the Weddell Sea. The water here is black and cold, filled with floating sculptures of white ice. The goal was to cross the continent on foot. But the ice had other plans. Just like Franklin's ships, the Endurance became trapped. But this is not a story of death. This is a story of the indomitable human spirit refusing to break. The ship was stuck for 10 months. Imagine the crew living on this wooden island in the middle of a frozen ocean. They played football on the ice. They walked the dogs. They listened to the ship groaning under the pressure. Creak. Growing. It sounded like the ship was crying. Finally, the ice won. It crushed the mighty ship. The crew stood on the ice floe and watched their home sink slowly into the dark water. They were thousands of miles from civilization, with no radio, sleeping on a sheet of ice that could crack at any moment. They camped on the drifting ice for months. They called it Patience Camp. Imagine sleeping in a tent made of thin canvas, listening to killer whales breathing in the cracks of the ice nearby. PFFFFFF, PFFFFFF, waiting. Just waiting. Drifting north with the current. The cold was absolute, but their hope kept them warm. When the ice finally broke apart, they took to 3 small lifeboats. They rowed for days through freezing spray to a desolate rock called Elephant Island. But they were still lost. No one knew they were there. So Shackleton made a choice. He would take 5 men in one small boat, the James Caird, and sail across the wildest ocean on Earth to find help. This journey is the greatest sea voyage ever made. Imagine a tiny 20-foot boat in the Southern Ocean. The waves were not waves, they were mountains of water, 60 feet high. For 16 days, they were tossed like a cork. The wind screamed. The water froze on the deck and they had to chip it away with axes to stop the boat from sinking. Chip. 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 They were soaked, frozen, and exhausted. But they did not stop. They navigated by the stars, when the clouds allowed a brief glimpse. A single mistake meant death. Miraculously, they reached South Georgia Island. But they landed on the wrong side. To get to the whaling station, Shackleton and 2 men had to climb over snowy mountains and glaciers that no human had ever crossed before. They walked for 36 hours without sleep. At one point, sliding down a foggy mountain in the dark, trusting only luck. They later said they felt a 4th man walking with them. A silent, spiritual presence guiding them to safety. Finally, they heard a sound. Not the wind. Not the ocean. But a steam whistle. The whistle of the whaling station. They walked into the station, looking like wild men with long beards and ragged clothes. The station manager looked at them and asked, "Who the hell are you?" Shackleton replied softly, "My name is Shackleton." He did not rest. He went back. He went back 4 times in different ships to rescue the men left behind on Elephant Island. And on August 30th, 1916, he finally reached them. As he approached the beach, he counted the figures through his binoculars. 1, 2, 3. He lowered the glasses and turned to his men with tears in his eyes. He said words that echo through history. They are all there. Every single man survived. Not one life was lost. The ice took the ship, but it could not take the men. And now, our epic journey through the mysteries and wonders of the world has truly come to an end. Look back at the path we have traveled tonight. We stood by the Somerton Man on the beach. We walked the misty valley of Istalin. We braved the snow of Dyatlov Pass. We climbed the lighthouse stairs of Flannan Isle. We drifted with the Mary Celeste. We sat in the silence of Franklin's ships. And finally, we survived the ice with Shackleton. The world is full of mysteries, but it is also full of miracles. The storms have passed. The ice has melted. The ships are safe in the harbor. The long night is over. You have traveled far, and now you have returned home. To your bed. To your warmth. To your safety. Feel the relief of the rescue. Just like those men on the beach, you are safe now. Let go of the tension. Let go of the day. Your body is sinking into the mattress, heavy and relaxed. There is nothing left to fight. There is nothing left to fear. The ocean is calm. The wind is just a whisper. Visualize a soft, warm light surrounding you. It is the light of peace. It is the light of rest. Your breathing is deep, slow, rhythmic. In and out. You are drifting away from the stories, drifting into your own dreams. A dreamless, deep, healing sleep. The book is closed. The candle is blown out. The silence is perfect. Stay here in this warmth. Stay here in this peace. Sleep now. Sleep. Sleep. Good night.